Hi, this is Elizabeth
So,
Dooling, and I'm calling from Boston, or listening from Boston, and where we have 3 exam schools, and the results of the admissions to the 3 exam schools were published in the newspaper today. And it was very interesting because they had done it by zip codes, and they changed the requirements and so on, and the test was eliminated. And there was a very nice increase in the number of underrepresented minorities in the 3 exam schools right across the board.
well, thank you for sharing that. Welcome everybody to tonight's roundtable discussion. This is the third of a series of 3 events that was held by the Alumni Association. I'm Judith Daniel, the chair of the Diversity Committee of the Alumni Association. And I would like to introduce to you Vivian Altman. Vivian Altman is the chair of our retention subcommittee of the Roundtable of Diversity Committee. And she will be talking next about what we're going to be talking about tonight. So Vivian.
Thank you, Judith. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this third and final conversation. I'm sure there will be much more discussion as we all are very deeply concerned around this. Just briefly, let me just tell you, I'm from the class of 77. I joined the Alumni Association Board a year ago. And that was because I wanted to give back to my alma mater, which gave me so much. And I joined the diversity committee because I have a very serious and dedicated commitment to diversity in my work life, in my professional life. And I really wanted to address the really appalling situation we have at Hunter. So I, as Judith indicated, I chair a subcommittee that is working on retaining Black and Latinx and faculty and students, and also addressing low-income students as well. And that's part of a 3-prong approach to the problem. The other 2 being admissions and recruitment, which were addressed at the other 2 roundtables. So what did we share in those first 2 roundtables? At the first roundtable in March, we looked at the status of admissions for the class of 2027, so hard to say, and discussed the lack of diversity in the last 20 or so years at Hunter, along with some historical perspectives from the 60s to early 70s. At the second roundtable, we examined data around admission testing, which was just mentioned by Elizabeth Dooling, and case studies at other schools. We looked at equitable admissions policies and processes with faculty, current students, former admissions director Kyler Kupferstein Torres, and also with alums. So what are we trying to accomplish tonight at this event? So we are going to explore the environment for Black, Latinx, and lower economic students, and also faculty at Hunter. The climate and environment is one that we understand is not one that is something that any of us, I think, would be happy to or proud of. And so one of the ways we can start looking at this is to explore what does the campus school's mission statement say? What does it state about supporting students through their time at Hunter? And the Hunter College Campus School mission statement is relatively lengthy, and you can readily see it on the website. And I don't know why I can't get to what I want to show you or tell you right now, but the bottom, there's one paragraph that I really want to relate to you specifically, and that is that the mission statement in its second paragraph states that our schools strive to reflect the city that they serve by admitting and educating a population of students who are culturally, socioeconomically, and ethnically diverse. We seek to serve as a model for combining excellence and equity, serving as a catalyst for change in New York City and the nation. So the question is, are we fulfilling that mission? And reflecting on the last roundtable event and thinking about what we want to sort of talk about tonight, what role does Hunter want to play in the greater community? And specifically around the issue of retention and climate and environment at the school, are we really providing that kind of culture at our school? So I think where we're going next, Kinshasa, is we are going to be all broken into groups, smaller groups, so we can have a conversation around these themes. There will be a facilitator. Some of the current students who you can see on the screen, lovely people who I've had the benefit of working with over the last year. I'm so proud to consider as my future fellow alums. And we have some thoughts around helping to facilitate that conversation, but we're going to spend 30 minutes together in these smaller groups, have open discussion, and then we will come out of that. One of you will hopefully present to the full group here when we come back in 30 minutes about your thoughts and themes around this. And then we'll hear from two other alums on some other additional thoughts from other schools and other concepts around retention that we can hopefully learn from. So with that, I guess, Kinshasa, we can move on to the breakout rooms.
We'll be taking notes and presenting that response afterwards to the group. So if there's something that you want not to be in the notes, please let the facilitator know.
And there's no need for retribution either. It's just to give everyone else a flavor for the conversation amongst the smaller groups.
I think you meant attribution and not retribution.
I did. I did.
Only another Hunter girl would correct you in front of all these people.
And it's fine.
I just
But
knew
we're
that
all
in
the
this
same
group,
people.
I
We're all
knew
the
in this
same
group,
people.
if I had the chutzpah to say that this group
I'm
would
great.
be okay with
Listen,
it.
I'm grateful for your chutzpah because I'm multitasking here.
I don't know about everybody else, but we had a phenomenal session just now. It's very cool.
Are you trying to suggest that you had a better session than anybody else's group?
Yeah, I did, Linda. So there.
It's great. Your bookshelves look terrific.
Thank you. And by the way, folks, if you don't know, it's funny. Linda and I actually met here in Austin, Texas in 2011.
Yeah, I didn't know there were other Hunter girls in Austin. I mean,
Yeah,
Hunter.
and that's what she calls me. I told you that. See, Eunice, I told you.
Oh, were you in a group with Eunice?
Yes.
You lucky guy, you. I wish I was in her group. I was very interesting to be in a group where people were saying, so what was it like for you? And I'm thinking, for me, with like most of the people were like Jewish girls from New York. You know, what was it like for me? Talk about what was it like for me since I left Hunter and since I left New York. But I'm very much interested in, I would have wished I could have been a fly on the wall listening to what you had to say, Eunice.
I think a lot of people don't realize they're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm always a New Yorker.
Yeah.
So I think
How did
what,
you-
what I think,
Foremost.
what I think our
What made
plan
you
was-
people migrate to Texas? No, I just wondered how they ended up in Texas.
I think our plan now was to just take a short amount of time, maybe 15 minutes for each group. Hopefully you had a facilitator,
Me.
and just to briefly just sort of summarize your group's discussion. So since you already have the floor, Brian, why don't we start with your group, and then maybe next we'll move to Maritza, and then since I don't know the other facilitators, we'll go from Maritza to somebody else. But Brian, why don't you start? Just
All
take
right.
a couple of minutes because we want to get to
Yeah.
everybody in 15 minutes.
I am Joe Bullet Points. So basically, the four folks that I had in my group represented 4 different classes, including mine, the class of 83. So class 69, class 71, class of 76/77, and class of 89. And here are the differences that came out of those discussions, because we opened it up and really talked about what was it like for you? How diverse was it? Really, what was your experience at Hunter? Okay. And so I'll break it down. Class of 69, Eunice mentioned that there were 4 Black students and maybe 1 or 2 Latino students. That's what 69 looked like. Okay. We jumped to 71. 71 was the start of special admissions, where 1/3 of the students that came in were brought in through this program. And the other experience that was brought in was that the diversity that was experienced at Hunter opened up this person's world. So they actually got to interact with more people that were not like them. And I think that that's a common theme here, where a lot of us are going to say that really one of the things that came out of Hunter was that we ended up meeting people that weren't like us. But the thing was, we didn't let those differences define them. So the way I always look at it is, I have Hunter friends. The only descriptor I use is Hunter. I don't use any other because it's not necessary. Okay. To jump to the class of 76/77, of course, that was the last class that was at, I think it was 463 Lexington, the office building. So that was that.
466, 466.
466. All right. Look, I didn't go there. I don't know. So, but it was the first, what was it? It was the class with boys. And so, you know, it changed the environment. Some say for the better, some say for the worse. I can't tell you, you know, I'm just a guy. I can't do anything about that. But also she mentioned, and Judy, she's on right now. She mentioned that there was reinforcement, not only from her parents, but from her teachers. And that was what I got as well. It was one of those things where you actually had spokespeople that supported you and said, you know, this Hunter should be a decision for you. You should take the Hunter test. And it wasn't so much you should take the Hunter test and then this is what's going to happen. It's you take the Hunter test. Once you get in, it's up to you to define your path and decide what you're going to do in those 6 years. And I think one of the other things that comes out of this, especially for people of color, it's one thing to be a person who comes in because of a quota or because of something else that's in place. It's another thing to maintain and stay. Okay. That is proof in the pudding. You have a Hunter degree, so shows that you not only could comprehend the curriculum, you could master it. Okay. And then finally, we have a big jump from 76/77 to the class of 89, where we had, I think it was Jonathan Burstein, but he basically had an aunt that taught at Hunter, and he had 2 brothers that went to Hunter. So he has the entire sibling and family relationship with Hunter as well. And one of the things he mentioned now, and this is something I think that we're seeing at Hunter now, and I really want the younger students to bring this up, is that he lives in Oregon, and he basically said Oregon's very white. And so his children are not getting the breadth of experience of diversity that he did when he was in New York City and when he went to Hunter. And that was really what our group talked about.
Okay, maybe Maritza can summarize.
He was in my class, by the way.
Yes. So Brian is one of my Hunter friends. So our group, we actually had representatives all the way from the class of 54 to the class of 09. So a really big range. And given the conversations that we had, the most diversity in our group that someone experienced was really in the 1970s. So someone in the 1960s talked about how there weren't that many girls of color, ditto in the 50s, obviously. In the 70s, that person talked about, it was about roughly 20% people of color. And that seemed to be the high point. And that's about as high as it got. We talked about issues with retention. Someone described a current environment that is inhospitable for kids of color. Someone else interestingly said, also from the 80s, it wasn't diverse then, it isn't diverse now. And so we really need to decide that we want to make this a commitment, and obviously we're all here. Right. And then something that I found absolutely intriguing in terms of issues with retention, someone talked about private schools that offer huge scholarships, sometimes as much as $40,000, essentially poaching students from Hunter. And so that raised a whole number of questions about, this view that there's a limited pool of very high gifted and talented and highly qualified students of color, which is actually not true. And then another person talked about, and along that point is the need for gifted and talented programs in communities. So that in fact, building that pipeline of students that have options, whether it's Hunter or another competitive school. And then we brainstormed a number of ideas to help support and the students that are there, including mentorship programs for both students and faculty of color, fundraising for programs, for better counseling programs, starting the year with anti-racism, unconscious bias training every year for everybody. We had a conversation about Big Sister programs, pairing older students with younger students, bringing in speakers and role models, whether they're alumni or non-alums who have come from similar backgrounds as students of color. And that was it. And I talked about the talented and gifted programs in neighborhoods where we want to draw kids. Or so, group members, anything that I missed or that you would add? All right.
Thanks, Ritz.
Is there, who else was a facilitator? Elaine, did you raise your hand? Were you a facilitator? No. Okay.
I was a facilitator. So
okay, Mia, yeah.
Yes, our group ranged from 68 to 98, excluding me. I'm to that.
No, it ranged to 65. It started in 65, not 68.
65 to 98, and then down to 2022. And I think we sort of touched upon, like, we talked about obstacles at the Hunter administrative level. So needing more data about faculty retention, things like that. We needing like all of our efforts, so the student effort, the alum effort, just everyone to be more coordinated, maybe consistent on the part of the Hunter administration, or just some central binding factor. We talked about some experiences, so like the discovery program, I think others talked about before. So the summer program that would bring students in and sort of give them supplemental or enrichment during the summer before Hunter. So possibly bringing that back. And then we talked about the Big Sister program, which is now the Big Sib program. But we heard a lovely anecdote from Stephanie about how she sort of talked to these students who were who were being very hostile towards a student of color. So I personally, that resonated with me, just having students like that or support systems like that for students of color. Yeah, I think that was about it. If there's anything that anyone else would like to add that I missed.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. That was great. And Linda in our group, Linda Baker, and I'm interested in where you are in Washington, but we'll get in touch with that later. She brought up, when we discussed faculty retention and the lack of, that in the faculty world, there is a smaller pool of BIPOC faculty available nationwide. And so we talked about the recruitment side, but also providing scholarships to students, BIPOC students who might want to get into education. And I think, if you can get out of college and graduate school without debt, that puts you in a very different position than doing so with debt. So thank you, Linda. That was a great suggestion.
Mhm.
Then they become indebted to come and teach at Hunter. That's sort of the point, that we give them a scholarship and they're awesome teachers. And then we also encourage Mia to talk to her classmates and try to recruit some Hunter students to pursue careers in education to come and teach at Hunter. And I'm complete.
So I was another facilitator, and in our group we had someone from class of 55, class of 65, class of 67, and class of 74. And I think what a lot of people said was that they really felt like the community at Hunter was very, very special, and race was not divisive, but then a lot of diversity either. And that's something that negatively impacted their learning experience. But there's this common theme that that Hunter was a special place, and that it was, you know, you were really lucky to go to Hunter, and then once you were at Hunter, you sort of never thought about leaving, because there were really great teachers and there were really fun activities that students did together, like field day, and there was like a faculty talent show which everyone liked like going to. I think we also talked about how there's a need for a support network for you know, underrepresented and low-income students, and the way things are now, that often the burden of getting help is on the student themselves, and that can be you know, really difficult. And also figuring out you know, ways to improve the fee waiver system, and you know, make sure that try and make it so that there aren't payment barriers, or students don't feel on the spot if they can't afford to participate in certain activities, or can't afford certain books, or like shirts that everyone else is getting. Yeah, does anyone want to add on? Am I leaving anything out?
I think it's just we were emphasizing, or I personally emphasized, the fact that the kids who need some financial support for whatever activities, even, you know, as you say, sweatshirts or anything like that, there should be some kind of a private way that they can access those funds without having to be stigmatized and to have to identify themselves as a student of low income, because you know, people in high school do wear a lot of the same clothes and shoes and stuff like that, and if you can't afford it, you're already, you know, you may be in a minority in the first place, and then you don't even have the clothes that the other kids have. So there should be some kind of a way to support these kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I was also a facilitator, and I won't waste time going over. I think a lot of what our group talked about was very similar to what other groups talked about. And I wasn't as organized as every other group and didn't write down what class my group mates were from. But
I can help you out with that, Naya.
Okay.
You got a Hunter brain. You don't need to write stuff down. Come on.
But I think some of the ideas that we were floating, I know Judith mentioned when she went to BU, they had a minority orientation, which was really great in helping to form connections among the minorities. I know we have, I guess like before, like I guess the larger pool of students came in, we have cultural clubs which are really good in doing that. But I think having like a specific minority orientation before getting thrown into, I guess the larger scene.
Yeah.
would be super helpful. Something else we talked about, I think other groups brought about, and I think we've been floating over the past year, is a possible alumni mentorship program for alumni of color and students of color to be able to see, I guess, these, people of color out in the world and how their life is and continues to be after Hunter, which I think is something that's super important. And I think one last thing that we touched upon, which is kind of, I guess, more long-term, is curriculum changes, which is a really big issue and kind of, especially within history, but also bringing it to a bunch of other classes like art and science and our English classes, kind of teaching these things not as one specific point in history, and I guess in our curriculum, but how they continue to impact our world today and how everything really connects. Yeah.
You need multi-threading, and that's one of the points that I've been talking about, in the sense that you want to be critical thinkers. You don't want to be test takers. You don't want to be focused on rote facts that are critical at a specific point in time, but then just disappear and dissipate. And we can help you with that, because depending on our experiences post-Hunter, I can tell you I've got 2 graduate degrees. I'm eventually planning to do my PhD at some point, but it's really one of these things where, and we talked about this in the group we were in, I think when you have a conversation with another Hunterite, it's one where you don't have to wonder whether or not you need to, quote unquote, dial down what you're talking about in order to be able to communicate. I think that is something that is unique of all Hunterites. I think, I think you might have even seen it in the breakout rooms, but it really is one of these things where when you get out in the quote unquote real world, you'll see that you don't get that as often. Okay, you will relish the times when you can talk to somebody that you feel like is on the same bandwidth. But it's very important, again, and I'm glad your group talked about this, is to really identify what's going on with the curriculum and to see what suggestions can be made. I mean, there's one that I'm going to bring up a little later. I'm not sure how much more time we have, but there's one I'm going to bring up a little later about what's called multiple intelligences. Okay, because we have more than just science and math and language arts, if we want to call it that. And I think it's important to understand it, because that broadens your critical thinking, and it also lets people see an inventory of what you bring to bear. Okay, because what'll happen is, say you have a hobby. Okay, I think you can see behind me, I've got different books that represent my different hobbies, but those different books also represent different skill sets that I have. And if you take it a level deeper, you find out that all of a sudden you represent different things that are above and beyond something that can be tested. Okay, and what that does, that starts to shape you, and then you become your Hunter identity, and you take that above and beyond Hunter, but you can also bring it back.
I would like to add, Naya, that just to add the particulars, that we had in our group of 4, class of 67, class of 98, class of 79, and class of 22. And also something that we talked about was, a question was brought up by Linda Banks, in terms of the attrition of students, and when does that occur?
Right.
And Naya was helpful in having us understand that it seems like, from her observation, it usually occurs around the 8th grade, when students aren't feeling supported, and yet they have the option of, okay, I could go to a 4-year high school, where I'm better supported, so that was something we discussed a little bit about. And what I also found interesting while we were talking, and I don't think I gave my experience, but the class of 67, Linda Bynes, that how Hunter, when she went to school, Hunter, wasn't that diverse. And her neighborhood high school, it wasn't much different from her neighborhood high school. But yet, Nate Berman from 98, he said when he was at Hunter, his class was more diverse and he had a great experience meeting students from different cultural backgrounds, and that it provided him with a different experience from his neighborhood high school. And so that at different time periods, like for myself, my experience at Hunter being class of 79 provided me with an experience of meeting students that I would not have met, you know, the
Right.
type of students, the backgrounds of students that I would not have met at my neighborhood high school. So
Same
the
here.
having a diverse student population and environment really did provide that experience that differed from what we would have ordinarily gotten if we had gone to our neighborhood high school or
Yep.
a different high school. And that was important in shaping how we are in the world today.
I would just add to that, Judith, that
Mm-hmm.
100% true for those of us who are, I mean, as a white person. But one of the things I said in our group was our faculty, when I class 77, our faculty was more diverse.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes,
I never
I
thought
said
about that. And, you know, I see Nate shaking his head, but I never thought about it. But, you know, we had a black woman as an English teacher. We had a black man as a music teacher. We had Asian and Hispanic.
Mrs. Hodges.
Mrs. Hodges, who's still gorgeous, still
Yes.
gorgeous.
Yes.
And, you know, there were all these
and guidance counselors. Well, I went to
Yes.
2 Black guidance counselors.
Asian,
Irene Dabney.
Latino,
Yep, and Wanda Webb.
That's right. We had Mrs. Nadell. You know, we had all of these, and I never thought about it. But, you know, aside, as I said in our group, you know, the impact on, you know, this white girl to have authority figures who are, you know, as a black man, a black woman, a Hispanic woman, that is formative for me as a white child. Can you imagine how impressive and important it is as a representation for a black or a Latino child? So I, you know, it's, you know, it's very significant for everyone, not just, I mean, of course it is for those children looking to see someone, you know, I'm reading Obama's book, and, you know, the whole point of children looking at the president of the United States and like, well, that could be me because I look like that. But for
Right.
people who don't look like that, and to see somebody and say, okay, well, that's a teacher. That's what a teacher looks like. You know, an educator. It's equally important for everyone. So, anyway, are we ready? Did every group get to speak?
I think so.
I think then, Brian, are you next?
Yes.
Okay.
You asked me, I'm going to take it. So, but I'm not going to take a lot of time. You know, I know we're getting a little late here, but really, I really wanted to broach 2 different ideas to this assemblage today. And it's something where I really want to get folks' feedback. And it was something where one of them is a self-experiment. The other one is more along the lines of some digging I did that I think could help us maybe not so much reshape what's going on, but address what's going on and maybe look at this as an augmentation of what needs to be done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share a graph that I put together. And basically what this is I did a little experiment. I said, okay, everybody keeps talking about what was the diversity like when I was in high school, or what it was in my class. I did a very simple experiment. Everybody, I think I would ask everybody do this at some point. It would be interesting to see the numbers. I simply went through my yearbook and counted everybody. And I figured out who was what. Then I said, okay, that's okay. Let me compare that to the census data of that decade. So what you're seeing right there is a comparison of what Hunter looked like, or the class of 83 looked like when we left. Now, I realize that this does not take into account attrition or loss of students, okay? This is the snapshot of what we had in the yearbook. And what you can see there is that there are significantly 2 groups that were overrepresented at Hunter based on the New York City census of 1980. White and Asian, which is very interesting. Okay. And then you see the percentages of Hunterites, you see the percentages of the New York City population, and you see how they correlate. I would say for the most part that the two center ones probably haven't changed much. And it will be interesting to see how that changed over, because we heard from one group that it sounded like the 70s, if we took this like a parabola, the 60s and 50s and 60s were kind of flat, 70s kind of peaked up, 80s probably, then 90s. And then it sounds like for some reason, due to either things going on in the world, in New York City, otherwise, it sloped down. And so now we probably have numbers that aren't even close to representing what I'm even showing here from 1983. So one thing I would ask folks is if you get around to doing it, it's just a quick flip through your yearbook if you still have it for your year, and then just count and see what was there, and then find the census data. There's a real simple site that I'll send to the group afterward, where you can find that census data that I found, because it's really going to show what the representation was of Hunter as a gestalt of the city versus the city demographics.
And this is comparing all ages, not just young people?
No, actually, this is the graduating class. So it's just the graduating class.
Right, but the city data is...
Oh, I'm sorry. That's overall. Yeah, I wish I could have boiled it down to 18-year-olds, because then that would be even more representative. But I just took that straight, and this was just a quick exercise to say, hey, here's some numbers up here. This kind of shows what was going on. But I think what will happen is if we get more of these over time, we'll see trends that'll probably hold up, and they can be indicative of what was going on in New York City at that time. Because one of the things I can tell you is, because I was the class of 83, I'm also a 1965 baby, which means that I was born 1 year after the Civil Rights Act was passed. Okay. There was an emphasis in Black schools, because I grew up in Harlem. So my school was primarily Black and Hispanic. There was an emphasis on Black pride. There was this thing where you had this identity and you realized who you were and what you were. And that translated to me into not feeling that I couldn't get into Hunter. It was more along the lines of, why shouldn't I be able to get into Hunter and take the test? I know that there are some challenges that are going on now. I know some of the younger people here, my heart breaks for some of the stories that I'm hearing from you about your experience there. I know a lot of us have talked about the fact that for us, it really was life-changing. It's really something that we still talk about. In fact, there are people that are probably our age. Like I have a coworker, I work for Dell, and I live in Georgetown, Texas. But I have a coworker that lives in New York City, and I told him I went to Hunter. He knew exactly what I was talking about. And he knew exactly what that meant. I'm not sure that translates the same way now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these things where, and I use this in my customer conversations, I always use the word compel. There has to be something there that compels students in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade to say, I want to choose Hunter as a school I want to attend, because it represents me. And it also allows me to interact with others that are not like me. Because those experiences, again, I think somebody else said this, if I had gone to school in my neighborhood, I would not have had the experiences that I had at Hunter. And I think that's very important. That's something that I actually call the flavor of each class, because I feel that each class has something to bring that is different from the class before it and the class after. I can actually talk to the different people in those classes, and they don't exactly feel the same, even though they're Hunterites from different years. Each class has its own flavor. And I can tell you my class, and we're represented here by my my fellow students, Maritza and David, we're class 83. We have reunions every 5 years. That tells you something. That means that we actually want to see each other every 5 years. And the reunions, you know, have remained big. And it's one of these things where you get a different mix of people at the reunions. And you start to see, wow, you know, we really did have a really diverse class of people in general. And it reinforces that. And it's something where you may even go back home and you don't see that. Or you may, you know, go to work and you don't see that. But it was something in that 6-year window that is unique to us, that is something that we carry forward and we carry it proudly. I want that pride to come back to Hunter. That's how emphatic I am about this. That is the reason why I'm on this call right now. And that is the reason why I offer my services to any student if they want to talk to me. And I feel that everybody else here should do the same thing. It has to be something where you've got support. I agree exactly with what Naya said. If you don't have that support, if you don't have that incubation where you're in the kiddie pool first and then you go into the deep end, you will miss that. And you will not want to jump into the deep end and feel like you're going to struggle and then feel like you want to leave in 8th grade. Okay, that was one thing. The next thing I'm going to share with you, and let me just stop my share for a minute, is something else that came up. And this is one that I brought up from a book called, it was a book I bought in 1993. It's called 7 Kinds of Smart. To take it further, there are now 8 kinds of smart. And what you see here is this is a checklist that is actually in the book that lets you go through and look at the different smarts. Okay, so the first 2 are Hunter tests. Okay, word smart and number smart. We know that. That is what people get tested on. That's how people enter Hunter. But there are other ones here that can also add to that total gestalt of what a Hunter student is. You see picture smart. Okay, I can tell you one of the things I have is paraphilia, and where I can see images in things I look at. Okay, some of that comes into picture smart. You've got body smart, where you've got people that may be more athletic, more agile, things like that. You've got music smart. You've got people smart, and then there's 2 more. There's self smart and there's nature smart. And so all of those together, one of the things I did was I actually sent this to a younger student at Hunter right now, and I asked her to check it off and come back with what her check marks are. I had a lot of check marks here. And what I translated that into is that there are things that I either have a passion for or have an aptitude for that intertwine with other things here, so that I am not just a English/math student that also does other things. It's more along the lines of I'm a critical thinker because I have all of these things that I pull from. And because I'm a critical thinker, I know how to look at things holistically. That to me is probably the most critical thing that Hunter allowed me to do, was really think holistically. I could start to see where there was interconnectedness between some of the courses. And so, you know, that took me into college, that took me into the working environment, took me into grad school, and it's something that I relish. And it's really something that I hope that we can eventually evolve or change or mutate, however we want to use the word, the curriculum, so that it reflects something like this. And so that these students really feel like they're well-rounded. It's not just about specific things that can be tested specifically and attributed to a number that somebody arbitrarily uses to make a decision about your future or not. And that's all I had.
Well, thank you, Brian. I believe Vivian had to disappear for something work-related.
Right.
So I guess I'll be taking over the role of MC for the end of this, but I also have a little portion of my own to share on retention strategies that other schools use. I do want to be mindful of time. So are we okay with me proceeding for the next 5 to 10 minutes? Is that cool with everybody? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. I'm seeing nodding, so I'm going to proceed. Hello, I'm Noah Kaminsky, class of '09. I am one of the younger alums on this call, but I think my perspective has value to this community. One, because I care. I think that's first and foremost. I care about my alma mater, and two, I have a perspective that I think is rather unique to almost any Hunter alum. Like, I don't know how many other Noah Kaminskys that are out there, and that's because I was a student. I have two siblings that went to Hunter. I came back to Hunter, and I've maintained continuity through my siblings, and I started coaching at Hunter, and I started teaching at Hunter. And so I taught from 2016 to 2020. I no longer teach at Hunter. I'm now at Horace Mann in the Bronx. But I know the school in many ways, and that's, I think, kind of powerful when you talk about perspective. Presently, forward, or in hindsight. And so, I want to celebrate my connection to the Hunter community, but I also feel exceptionally well set up to critique it and join the call for improvement and reform. And so that's kind of what I'm stepping into now. Our school can do a better job at providing an inclusive environment that celebrates culture and values equity. And I think a selective education, the one that we have all received, does not need to be an exclusive one. I love my time in high school, and I look back to myself, and I think, as maybe Nathaniel reflected in the chat earlier, I feel that I had a privilege to the diversity that was around me. And then I also feel a little elitist and exclusionary because there was a lack of diversity that could have been or should be. And so maybe there's the diversity of where people came from in the city, where they are now, what jobs they've selected for themselves. But in terms of the ethnicities that were present in my school, I graduated in '09. There was a significant lack of diversity, and I don't want to be a part of an institution that feels elitist or exclusionary. I think it's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, inclusion, culture, and equity matter because they level the advantages of class, wealth, and history. To me, as an educator, those are things that really don't matter to my teaching in terms of where I want kids to feel that they fit into society in the long run. They may matter to your teaching of history, but that's a whole other story. I don't teach kids to ostracize. I don't teach kids to segregate others. And I certainly don't teach kids how to pull more wealth out of the societies that they already operate in for any sort of selfish benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of my professional developments ever emphasize that as well. And so how do we level that feeling? How do we bring all people together, all students together for a hospitable and inclusive environment, and where they learn to become themselves in the long run? Because your high school years and maybe early college are your formative years. So if I have an opportunity to make a difference, I'm going to, for my alma mater. One thing I really want to emphasize with strategies for retention is that we should be taking an asset-based approach to these strategies. And in the educational world, that means leaning on our strengths and reframing our narrative on teaching inclusion, culture, and equity to focus on the strengths, and instead of emphasizing deficits or skill deficiencies. Like, what do we have together? What can we do together with what we have already? And so I know a lot of those things that we have in the building at the school because I taught in the building and I saw some of them from the faculty perspective as well as the student perspective, and now as an alum. I work at Horace Mann. We were talking about this in our breakout room, but you can say what you will about private schools. They have decided, many of them, to create a diverse learning environment for their students. And it's not hard to see why parents would rather send their children to schools where that diverse learning environment has been crafted for them in some cases. And we may be the unfortunate victims of how private schools have taken students out of the pool of qualified applicants to our own school, but that's not unique to Hunter. That's true for gifted education across the country right now. And so I think the students who are here with us representing HCHS for diversity have done a lot of great work to show us that this is not the case. We need to figure out new strategies for admissions, but that was in a different roundtable. I'd love to just shout out the fact that I taught Aruna in 7th grade and Mia in 8th grade, and they were a pleasure to have in the classroom. So I'm so proud to see them doing the work they're doing now. I did not teach Naya, but in getting to know her from the retention subcommittee, I've been really impressed with all 3 of you. So at Horace Mann, we have an office for identity, culture, and institutional equity. And one of the first things that office does is make sure that faculty are receiving professional development around race, around cultural identity, and what that looks like in a learning community. I've been privileged to attend a couple professional developments already this year, some internal, some external. And I think the most powerful ones are what we call equity chats, which is we offer faculty the opportunity to get together and talk about how they're building equity into their teaching. And so teachers will give examples of what they're doing to foster this inclusiveness in their own curriculum. And, you know, I haven't given a presentation. I'm not that good at this. I'm here to organize and push others around me who know this stuff better than I do. But it's been enriching for my teaching, and I'm certainly changing things in my own curriculum because of these equity chats, which are free formatted, like the one we're a part of right now. I would call this an equity chat in many ways. For students, we have affinity groups, and actually for faculty, we have affinity groups. So we have a Students of Color affinity group, which takes place, I think, every Friday during our advisory period, and then one other activity period during the week. And this is an opportunity for those who have opted into this group to meet with a faculty member of color. It could be one of our division heads or other faculty, and there is a topic of discussion, and they just hang out. And I've walked by a couple times, I've sat down and listened a couple times, and they're great. The kids really engage and they enjoy being there with each other. The faculty affinity groups are spaces, safe spaces for faculty to get together and talk about issues related to race, related to income. And so those are broken up into white faculty and faculty of color. And those are safe spaces where anything that's an issue or on someone's mind is open for discussion. We also offer at Horace Mann 2 different seminars called Seminar on Identity. One happens in the 6th grade, one happens in 11th grade, and they are classes that happen. So we have trimesters, we're moving to semesters, but they are trimester long courses where students talk about their identity, who they are, where they are, how they fit into the society around them, how they fit into the country, how they fit into the world, what's going on in the world, how does that affect them, what are their family values. This is stuff that is engaged and talked about, and I think there's certainly room for a retention strategy like that at Hunter. There are bits and pieces of that at Hunter already, but I think it needs to be beefed up more. I think there needs to be more structure and more organization dedicated toward seminars like Seminar on Identity. And then lastly, we have parent and family programming with with board engagement. So there is a board of the school, and they are constantly a part of the way that the school reaches out to parents and emphasizes speakers. I think like someone else was suggesting about, I think it was Vivian suggested bringing in speakers from outside the Hunter community or inside the Hunter alumni community. And so the board is very much involved in that and engaging with families so that families can see where their kids can go someday, who they could be. So for programming, I would say that that's kind of all of the main strategies that I see on a day-to-day basis in my teaching and in my place on campus. Lastly, anytime that something happens in the world, in the politics, social issues, war, anything of consequence that affects communities that are present in our school, the administration will craft a letter, the entire administrative council from the nursery, the lower, the middle, the high school, and our nature lab. They will write a letter talking about what happened, addressing the conflict, and then they will outline steps that the school is taking in each of those divisions to engage our own community in responding to what could be a traumatic event or a tragedy. And so then that becomes very much a present part of what we do in our own teaching, in our assemblies together, which are weekly. And it feels awe-inspiring, and I commend the administrative council for every time there's something of consequence happening, them getting together and saying, this is where we stand on the issue. This is how we feel about it. And this is what we need to do to make our community work better together to prevent this in our own space. It's interesting to see a private school take on those roles, especially because private schools have been associated with white supremacy for a long period of time. And so I think it falls to private schools to be as anti-racist as possible and address those issues which are so historically ingrained in the culture of their institutions across this country. I couldn't agree more with the call for a diverse faculty. I mean, I think a diverse faculty models an inclusive professional community for students, families, and other faculty. And you can't address many of these systemic issues without having a model for students in the building with them. There's so much more that we can do, but again, an asset-based approach to retention says that we should start with the strengths, says we should start with the things that we're already good at and build on those and expand from there. So that's my take. It is at this point that I want to thank all of you guys for attending, and we are going to move into our questions and answers session. Please, if you have questions for any of the speakers, any of the facilitators, or one another, the floor is yours. And I hope you'll stay engaged with what the alumni are doing and what the students are doing with HCHS for diversity.
Okay, floor is open.
What are the next steps for this group?
That is a great question. There has been some motion to get more people interested in citywide data on admissions together. Mari Franklin, class of
84.
84. I was going to say 84. I knew she wasn't 83. She's been kind of jumping into that role as our new head of the subcommittee on recruitment. So that was the person that I would refer anyone who's interested in the data to if you want to reach out to me, but I will send her information along if it's not already posted in the chat. There was also an interest in continuing this roundtable series and addressing issues in a more detailed way, really sort of digging into a few things. Yeah. And building on the mentorship program that started last summer under the guidance of Judith, and expanding that and just keeping that momentum. There's so much more we can do, things we probably haven't even thought about. So your contribution is welcome. What did I want to, there was something else I wanted to mention. Yeah, I'll get back.
I have actually.
Linda, we can't hear you.
We lost you, Linda.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Am I on?
Yep.
Yeah,
And we lost you again.
We lost you again.
Is this back?
Now you are. Speak
I'll
now,
talk-
quick.
I'll try to talk fast. If anybody who's organizing these meetings wants to do asynchronous involvement in between meetings, I have some software that I use for a lot of work that I do, and I'm happy to share it. So if you wanted to put everybody in this group into like a chat where people could continue the conversation or make suggestions or things like that in between meetings, I'd be happy to set up a site to enable that to happen.
So a
So I
collaborative
mentioned
space.
Yeah, it's a collaborative space that I use. And I mentioned something in the chat to Hello HCHSAA, I think, and to Judy, I think, as well. But if one of you wants to reach out to me, and if you're interested, I'd be happy to set something up for anybody who's in here and do any kind of support like that for Hunter initiatives. It's sort of what I think I can offer up if that's of use.
I appreciate that. I think, Judith, you might know more about connecting people, alums in a dialogue, but I'll also say that David Robeson, who's been instrumental in organizing these roundtables, has been working with another alum to set up a Wikipedia page where all of the information that we've provided exists for you to access.
Well, I think what I'm suggesting is, as this group continues to work together, ways in which we can talk to one another in between meetings. And this particular tool that I use has this artificial intelligence, not like your intelligence. And so it kind of can pull out themes and word clouds and stuff like that. So it just might be interesting for us to use as a way to stay connected. I'm just so far away from New York City. I'm craving hearing these accents more. And also just, I love listening to Judith talk. It was like, she's like from New York. I haven't lived there. You know, Brian.
About me?
Yes, you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I lived
Well,
in
you know
Austin for
what?
40
As
years.
Noah said, we've been working on different ways to stay connected in terms of the diversity committee and the subcommittees within the diversity committee. And then, you know, the Alumni Association has a diversity page, and we just happen to, you know, there's always this big group email chat going on, but any way that we maintain the conversation going is a great thing, you know.
Yep.
So yes, and I'm not tech savvy, so I'm going to leave it to those who are more tech savvy to even like to look into this. But yes, this is, you know, you asked the question, where do we go from here? You know, we generated a lot of thought tonight, and perhaps we didn't come up with definitive, we're going to step 1, step 2, but again, we brought up a lot of things to think about, to explore, and it's a process. It definitely is a process, and it's a process that will be continuing. The diversity committee, we are working through the summer. Noah mentioned we had an internship last summer with Hunter students. We're hoping to reinstate that internship again. They were very important part of research and development of thoughts and ideas. And we're looking forward to, particularly with the retention committee that Vivian chairs, the subcommittee, to coming up with recommendations to present. As we had, you know, stated earlier, we really, you know, we don't have the power to say, okay, we're going to put this into place, or but we can, as an association, and with you, the alums, we can offer our voices, our thoughts, and our recommendations, you know, and we have the backing of the students too, that have offered their experiences and also our experiences as alums to really say, hey, these are the things that we have to offer. These are, you know, things that we feel that would make Hunter a better learning environment for all students, you know, because really, you know, a diverse education, a diverse learning environment it benefits all students, you know. So, and that's really what we're focused on, you know. And so, you know, it was great, you know, have this format to have, you know, to hear from the individual voices of alums, and to really to start to talk about, you know, how we can put into practice the things that need to be put in place, what needs to be added, what, you know, what expand upon what's working right now, what they're, like Noah was saying, you know, look at what the assets and what's present, the strengths that we have as a community, as the student body, and as, you know, programs that are in place, and expand upon. So the communication, we will continue to have this communication and this dialogue going on. And we look forward to having, you know, come the fall, to having more discussions like these, and maybe even more targeted, to come up with, you know, recommendations and solutions, you know, because as alums, we can actually be part of the process of a mentoring program, or, you know, so we look forward to having that, you know, as time progresses. Are there any other questions? Yes. Elaine. Unmute, you need to unmute.
Okay, I just quickly, I feel that having been now to all 3 sessions, I think we've absolutely proven that more diversity is needed. I don't think we should really spend a whole lot more time on measuring this and measuring that. We know it, except somebody said that in the early 70s, there was some kind of a program, was quickly alluded to, and diversity went up in the early 70s and mid 70s, and then went down again. I mean, does anybody have any research on what that program was? Was it a good program? Because if it helped, we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe there was a program that actually
that was a question
good.
that I had asked, because it was part of my group, and I had actually asked, it's like, does anybody know what the result was? And I think with some of this, we're gonna have to approach it like archaeologists or sociologists, because it'll have to be something where if there are records of that, we'd have to look at those as opposed to student opinions. Because you know, and if it's there, it would be great. You know, I fear it may not be, but I think that's where we'd have to take that next step to see how effective that was, and if it really was something that played out or just became integrated, right? Or yeah, exactly. It either took off or it didn't.
Let me just jump in and say there's a great passage in Elizabeth Stone's book about Hunter from the early 70s, where the school was facing budget cuts, and I mean Hunter College was facing budget cuts. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm 3 steps beyond this in my own generation of Hunter, but maybe more than 3 steps. The Hunter College administration was facing budget cuts, and the students pleaded the principal, the students pleaded the college president not to close the school. And the college response at the time, I thought, was extremely thoughtful. And she basically said, you know, this is a school that lacks diversity. It is a representation of the upper echelon of our city. And my college does a service to take students who enter it and elevate them out of the class that they were in to a higher socioeconomic status. Why in any way, shape, or form should I help you? Why should I help the campus schools if you're not doing the same thing? And I think that's a powerful message. Like, we don't want to encounter that again. And so we need to figure out how to change that.
Okay, I need to go back and reread my book, because I actually spoke to Dr. Stone when I bought the book when she was teaching at Fordham, and we had a lengthy conversation about her experience of looking outside in. And so I need to go back and you know, revisit that, because maybe some answers are in there.
I was there at that time.
Yeah.
And my sense, I was class of 74. My sense of what was going on was rather different.
Okay. I mean, that's what the book says.
The problem was not budget cuts for the college, it was open enrollment, which stretched the entire CUNY system, enormously, because as of 1970, any New York City high school graduate who wanted to go to CUNY could.
Right.
And so they were flooded with kids, and they were flooded with kids who were not prepared for college. And the colleges all had to start devoting resources to remedial English and remedial arithmetic. And so that was the source of the pressure. I mean, I know that my mother was the director of remedial math at Hunter College at the time. In fact, she hired a lot of ICY students when I was in ICY as tutors for college kids who could not do the math, who could not do elementary and high school math in order as prep for college. But the threat to close the schools, I believe, came from Albany. I don't think it came from from Jacqueline Wexler. And the problem, of course, was funding for CUNY, but it may have been Albany saying that. I don't know that anybody was saying we were some elite school and therefore shouldn't be there, because we went up to Albany. A busload of people from the high school went up to Albany to lobby in the state legislature, and because of the special admissions program, the line we were using and we were instructed to use is, this is quality integrated education. And at the time, Hunter was much more integrated, at least in terms of Blacks and Hispanics, than it is now. At the time, there weren't many Asians, and there weren't as many Asians in the city.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, certainly my impression, I was in 10th grade when we went up to Albany. It was 71, 72. That's when they threatened to close us down. And the school responded partly by doing a lot more, suddenly dreaming up experiments, because the logic for why we existed was that we were supposed to be experimental. We were a lab school.
Right.
And we needed to have more experiments, which is why we suddenly had mini courses. It's why we had ICY, although ICY might also have been perceived as a way to save money. And it was why we went on trimester for a while. I mean, all sorts of things suddenly changed, And then we started lobbying. And then I believe what we were, I'm not remembering all the details, but it was a piece of legislation in the state legislature that said you cannot close the Hunter campus schools. And I think that may have passed, or else CUNY gave up on the notion. Obviously, it didn't get closed. So,
but at the same time, there were
I'm happy to stand corrected on that. I think the thing that most impressed me when I read the book, which was a couple months ago for that particular passage, was just the college president's response to the students who were pleading the college president not to close the school or not to give in to Albany. And I thought what the college president is quoted saying, according to Dr. Stone's book, was quite insightful about this moment now that we're dealing with the pandemic and the
and yet at that time, the high school was much better. In terms of
right. They were standing on much more solid ground than the school is now.
Yeah. One of you at that time too, there were programs, there were initiatives to increase the diversity of school. I went to, I spoke to her this morning because today's her birthday. I went to school with a student who was recruited from her nursery school in Harlem to go to the elementary school, and they were I think she said today, if I'm not mistaken, they were like, as she was looking at pictures of her of her Hunter elementary class, and there was like 9 girls, Black girls in that class, so there was active recruitment, there was support giving to students. I think there was a discovery program at the time, but as someone mentioned during this discussion, it's one thing to get in and it's another thing to stay.
Right.
So, and these students, graduated from Hunter, so there was a lot of support. There were a lot of initiatives at the time. My understanding in terms of what may have changed is that they reached the point, and I may not be fully accurate with this, but that you could not select students solely on the basis of being Black or
Right.
Latin or Hispanic, you know?
Right.
So we had to change the way kids were recruited to the school change. And that may have caused the decrease in the numbers of Black and Latin students.
That goes back to what I was
70s.
talking. Yeah, that goes back to what I was talking about with the changes in the decades, because you know, going back to the 70s, you also think about New York City being broke. Okay. and I know a lot of us that are that old remember how broke New York City was because it looked that way. If you look at the movies like The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 or Taxi Driver, something like that, you see how broke New York was. Okay. The 80s was like a renaissance in comparison. But I think that what you saw was exactly what you were just talking about, Judith. There were policy changes that happened because of economic and social changes that were happening over those decades. One of the things that I'm actually sad about is the fact that I feel like I didn't carry the banner on for civil rights, in the sense that we got complacent. Okay. It was all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? Things are kind of like a little bit easier now, so we can just kind of cool out. And I feel that because we did that, we took the foot off the pedal and it just went. And so, you know, part of this is a holistic type of thing, you know, but it's also one of these generational things that now with this newer generation, they're facing new things. You know, I see them as really being that spearhead to do new things. You know, it's not so much completely on them, but it should be let's learn from what happened and see where we need to go forward.
Judith, do you know whether when you were, if she's still there, when you were at Hunter, did they have the special admissions program when you came in? Like when I came in, so I started fall of '68, and there were a whole lot of girls who went to summer school before the start of 7th grade, which included a number of kids who were flagged from elementary schools who did not pass the test but were close, and they felt these kids could do well in Hunter. And that
I think we did.
Increase the number.
I believe so. I believe so. I heard about students who went to summer school.
Yeah.
And I believe that was in existence.
And I don't know when they got rid of that or why they got rid of that, but and that, you know, that was not specifically targeting non-white kids. It was also all the elementary school kids who didn't pass the test had to go to school.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And there was a time, if I'm not mistaken, during Dr. Miller's tenure, I graduated in '65, and there was another program that came in after that, just after the September after we graduated, where they were taking people only from Manhattan for a brief moment. There was a time when only girls from schools in Manhattan were admitted, but that was a very short period of time. I think it was under Dr. Miller. But it was after that time, but I know that existed. What is somebody else, the name of the book by this Dr. Stone? What is the title of it?
Oh, I'll put a link in the chat in a second.
Thank you.
When did you graduate? The person who said that they were taking only girls from Manhattan.
I graduated in '65, and this started soon thereafter.
My sister started in fall '66, and they were not doing that.
They may have done that later. This was a Dr. Miller initiative.
No,
and Dr. Miller came in after, no, this did happen. Dr. Miller came in after Miss Bush retired or something like that.
No, Dr. Miller was the principal of the high school when I was there, 68 to 74. And then he became the director of campus schools. And
yeah, but there was a time when they were only taking people from Manhattan, but it was a short-lived program.
It was not true from the class that entered in '66 until...
That may not have been when it happened. There was another special program that entered that began after we graduated in '65. They were bringing in new people in that September who were coming in under some kind of a different set of admission criteria, as I remember, because we talked about it a great deal. And then something else happened where there were only people from Manhattan, but I think it was a very short-lived program because it didn't really make any sense.
Dr. Stone covers that. She covers that in her book.
Yeah. So I think
the late '70s, or when was that?
I don't know. It was after 65. That's all
I
I
know,
know.
but it
Not-
definitely was not fall of 66 until.
It may not have been, but it was under Dr. Miller, I believe. I don't know when in
When
his
he was principal.
Can I ask that we table this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we can research it.
Also,
What's
really,
the name of
Just
the
say
book?
one thing. I was a big sister. I graduated in 1968, and I was a big sister of seventh graders. In that class, there were a couple of kids who were admitted under the special admissions group. So, and it was under Dr. Miller.
But it wasn't only, well, maybe special admissions was only from Manhattan.
I'm not sure exactly what the terms were. There were a couple of girls, throughout the whole grade at least.
Yeah.
And they had special tutorials over the summer in math and in English.
So there are many different types of initiatives,
Yes.
and I think
Right.
that that's something that we can research to see what worked and what didn't.
Right.
There's
Exactly.
someone that has their hand up. The time it's past 8:30, so
Yeah, I think it was Mia.
question. And
Mia wanted to speak.
oh, I was just going to amplify Mimi because I saw that you were getting cut off a few times, and I don't know if you still want to speak, but also before, just really quickly, I'm going to put the link for the HCHS for Diversity email list sign up in the chat. So you just go in and put your email list, and we have a whole bunch of things that you all can partake in and hear about the events that are coming up and things like phone banking, call banking, and the alumni network is so expansive. So I think even sharing that if you want to would be amazing. Okay, Mimi, did you still want to?
So much. I just wanted to say, someone was asking what was the gifted program in the 70s that some kids came from. I think you might be referring to the Astor program. I'm not sure. I was in the Astor program in 1978. And then, I started a Hunter in 83. So that might be the program that you're referring to, run by Brooke Astor.
Not the program that I was referring to, but could be some other.
Okay, but it was a great program, and I'm still friends with everyone I was in the program with in my class. We're still friends now, and that's a long time. And some of them went to Horace Mann, actually.
What class were you in, if you don't mind me asking?
89.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is 8:40, and we've had a spirited discussion, but I
Yes.
think for many of us, we need to come to a close. I would like to give a personal thanks to Noah Kaminsky for coming up with the thought of this roundtable discussion, and his work with David Robeson, who I'm not sure if he's still on the call. I want to thank both of them for their work. I also would like to thank Vivian Altman and our presenters, over the past 3 roundtable discussions. The students, of course, we had other students that presented at discussions number 1 and 2. They're fabulous. They provided us with so much information and so much heart into this struggle and this fight for diversity, increase in diversity at Hunter. So I give love and thanks to the students, and of course to all of the alums, for participating, for giving your questions, your thoughts, your ideas, your help, your time, your skills, your talents. We continuously need that from you, and we will be, always asking it from you throughout, moving forward. Like I said, this is a discussion, we're going to be ending now, but the discussion doesn't end now. It continues on.
Right.
And okay, and I would like to thank Kinshasa for hosting and managing tonight's Zoom event. So again, I'm Judith Daniel. I'm on the executive committee of the Alumni Association. I'm chair of the diversity committee. The diversity committee will be having its meeting next Tuesday. And, so the discussion continues on. It continues in small groups, large groups with 2 people, but the discussion will continue. And we are with the focus to come up with some meaningful answers, recommendations to make some significant changes at Hunter. So on that note, thank you, everybody. Have a good night. and safe, keep well during these trying times, turbulent times. It continues to be a struggle in society, but keep well, everybody.
Exactly. Thank you, my fellow Hunterites.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Night.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.